what are new technologies that manufacturers are adopting, such as connecting to mobile, plant floor, maybe some of the disruptive technologies, cloud, big data evolution. Can you make a couple comments on newer technologies and how they play in manufacturing?
Well, I think you just mentioned them, all the above. Again, the key to it is, though, as these come into play, there has to be a way to integrate them and integrate them in with a control level, control being not from a physical device, but actually from a data information level. And I think as these things come into play, they're all readily available, and we've actually worked with all those with Ignition. It's the ability to use these things and use the technologies in a controlled fashion.
Thanks. I appreciate your comment on that. Francisco, do you have some thoughts on newer technologies from your viewpoint in your country that manufacturers are adopting?
Yeah, well, luckily, well, you have to remember Ecuador is a country in development, so yeah. we're basically seeing finally being adopted in the plant floor, like in manufacturers, technologies like GPRS for data collecting when you have like remote sites, and finally being able to collect all the data in one site. Basically, I think the most innovative things that we're seeing nowadays in control systems are related to connectivity, to networking, basically. And that's where we're discovering locally down here in South America, basically.
Great, thanks. Brian, any comments from your side on that?
The technologies, really, the new technology is all of these technologies working together to create that common goal to get from the sensor point, from that one data point, wherever it may be in the world, back to the person who wants to use it. We've coined a phrase around our company, trying to grow that phrase, and that's M to U, machine to you, whoever that may be in the equation, whether it's machine to the CEO, machine to plant manager. Ignition allows us to close that gap. We're using all the technologies, the wireless networks, the cellular networks, secured networks, parallel networks. Everybody's PLCs, HMIs, PCs, printers, copiers. We're collecting data from that, and Ignition bridges that gap, brings that technology together, and creates that real M to U continuity of technologies, which is really a new technology in our view as its own, because in the past everybody's had those walled gardens and the proprietary software where theirs was the best, their hardware was the best, and they really became roadblocks to promoting technology. So technology is the advancement of prosperity and technology. So we're heading in that direction, and Ignition's doing that for us.
Yeah. Yeah, Brian, you mentioned, I know you mentioned this yesterday when we were doing sort of a practice session for today, but you mentioned the M to U, which I like that phrase. You're coining it. You're starting to use it a lot so people get it, because you're right. The U in this case is the CEO. It's a plant manager. It's anybody in the organization where one of those data points, one of those sensor points, wherever it may be in the world, needs to get to somebody who needs that information to make a good decision with it. So you're really, and that is, I think this group and the attendees are going to be pleased when we get Ignition 7.7, which is coming out next month, because Ignition obviously can run on cloud-based networks and connect to cloud-based servers now, but Cloud Templates is coming soon in conjunction with 7.7, and I think that's going to open up some more possibilities for really leveraging across enterprises some of the solutions that are created by you for your customers. Does anybody else want to comment on newer technologies before we go on to the next question?
We're seeing, and this is probably going to catch some people off guard, but we're seeing in our market that at some point in the not-too-distant future that the SQL database is going to be dead. And what I mean by that is that the Internet of Things is expanding so rapidly, and we'll be pushing on the plant floor so in such great amounts that we're going to see an IP address on just about everything. And the ability of a SQL database to handle that sort of level of activity and to do some analysis on it is going to give way to big data. So one of our things that we really keep an eye on is the state of that market and where it's headed, because we see that coming rapidly.
I think you made a very good point there, David. I can tell you that keeping an eye on that market and being aware of it and looking at it as one develops and evolves from the viewpoint of ignition and inductive automation is a critical component, and one that I think we need to be aware of as this evolution of technology goes, because it's the Internet of Things is on its way, it's happening, and you're right, everything in the world is going to have an IP address attached to it, so we have to think about how we're going to manage big data with real emphasis on big.